Hi, my name is Paul Friedman. I founded the Marriage Foundation. And today we're going to be discussing a very interesting topic. You know, I was a divorce mediator. Yes, it was more than 20 years ago before I switched my practice. So I have a lot of experience with communication, and this topic is how to solve relationship communication problems. Now, the reason why this is so interesting, and I'm probably the right guy for this, is because everything is about communication when you're doing divorce mediation. And then when I started to help people with their marriages, most people, like 80% of the people who contacted me, when I asked them what's wrong, they said, well, we have communication problems. And it's interesting because communication, think about communication as everything within you, and there's a lot to you. You have a conscious mind, a subconscious mind, you have your thinking, your philosophies. It all comes to the point of communication with your spouse, doesn't it? And so what happens is, when there's a breakdown in the communication, we think the problem is the communication. But it isn't. However, that doesn't mean that you can't heal some of the problems that you have in communication. And we're going to use this video for that. Now, you're going to want to learn more about marriage, how I teach it, because it's far different from the mainstream. The mainstream doesn't understand marriage. They don't understand relationships. They don't understand people. Ironically, Western psychology, you would think, understands the mind, and yet they do not. And the reason why they don't is because they eliminate the fact that we're souls who have a mind. And this is not a religious thing. I'm not from a religion trying to teach you our dogma. It's just obvious, isn't it? That our higher consciousness, where we experience love, that's our soul. And so if you leave that out of the equation, what do you have? It's sort of like having your computer discussing with someone else's computer. So you're a soul, you're connecting with your soulmate, your spouse, and your breakdown is at the level of communication. So I'm going to give you some help here. Number one, and this help is only as good as your understanding of marriage. So I've written books, I have courses for men and women, and it's truly, these are very valuable assets because mainstream doesn't understand. So remember, you're with this person of your dreams, your soulmate, and you want to be with them, not because you belong together, as romantic as that sounds, and it's true, you do belong together, but you're with them because you want to be happy. You want to literally be happier every single day of your life. You also want to experience love. These are the two main goals also of your life, not just of the relationship that you have with your soulmate. So if these are the goals, reasoning, logic tells you that every form of communication and everything that you communicate using that form of communication should communicate those things that produce happiness and love, right? And yet, did you ever think of that? No. And this is the problem with mainstream. They like to deal with problems. I like to deal with turning your marriage into that which is what it was meant to be. So rules, have some rules for yourself. Rule number 1. And remember, there's different forms of communication. There's verbal communication. There's facial communication. There's bodily communication. There's even thought. It's a form of communication. And then there's your actions. Actions communicate. For all of those, rule number 1 is only communicate those things which will produce happiness and love. And the skeptics who I met with always said, yeah, but what if you have a problem with the kids at school and blah, 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 blah. Well, that doesn't matter. Any topic that has to be addressed can be addressed in a positive, loving fashion. I don't care if you think that they did something wrong and you need to dress them down for that. Actually, that would be breaking rule number 1. And if you go back and you look at what is beneath rule number 1, it is geared towards the only important thing in your marriage, happiness and love. All of the other things are easily taken care of under this umbrella. We live in a very mundane material world, so our minds become saturated with things that we think we have to take care of. And it's missing the point of life. You're not alive so that you can bust your butt all day working, get a few minutes in front of the boob tube, have a little sex, eat a good dinner, laugh a little, get stoned a little. That's not why you're alive. And that's not why you get married. You're alive to experience ever-increasing happiness. Ever-increasing happiness. What a concept. You're also alive to experience unconditional, ever-expanding love. These are your purposes. You're a human being. You don't have to go off onto a mountaintop and sit and meditate to achieve this. But you have to know that this is your birthright. Well, how can I tell you that? What do you think? This is mystical? This is not mystical. Listen, you have free will, right? You know what happiness is. So with free will, you always have a choice to do, behave, live for, find happiness or not. Who's the idiot that doesn't? We are, because we're not taught these things. We are evolving. Everyone knows we're evolving technically. You know, we have these revolutions of industry, revolutions of this, but what about maturing spiritually? Fulfilling ourselves as human beings, we're very special. And marriage is one of the most special, I call it a spiritual path. Because within it you get to achieve ever-increasing happiness and ever-expanding love together with another person. So that's rule number 1. Rule number 2, you want me to repeat it? Rule number 1 is make sure all of your communication in any of the ways you communicate is going to bring about more happiness and more love. That's rule number 1. Rule number 2 is the flip side of that. Because we live in a world of duality. There's always good and bad, up and down, left and right. So you flip that over. Rule number 2 is never communicate anything that will undermine happiness and undermine love. Some people go, that's not realistic. Well, I'm telling you that it is. People who take our courses experience this growth that they do themselves. The courses merely show them how. And this is what's missing in our lives, is love and happiness. Now we know about love. We're told by the experts, by Western psychology, you can Google it, that love is an exaggerated like. Hell no. And you know it isn't. Like is, what a cool, talking to the guys, what a cool car. Wow, I love this car. Or I'm talking to the women, like is, oh, I love that dress. That's expanded like. That's increased like. Love is what you experience when you hit that connection where your mind breaks off because it cannot wrap its arms around it. Remember, the mind is yours. It belongs to you. It isn't you. Experiencing love is not the same as experiencing exaggerated like. It's another dimension. It is the dimension of the soul. It is the true us. If you want to know the truth, love is the truth. Everything else can't be, because we live in a world of duality where there are no absolutes. But love is absolute, and it absolutely has the ability for you to attach yourself to it, to attach your mind to it, and live in this realm of ever new joy. It's so cool. When you really learn about this, your life changes. So there's more, but I suggest you subscribe to the channel so that you can learn more about marriage the way it's meant to be learned. So that's rule number 1 and rule number 2. Rule number 3 is moderate your mind. We're not taught this, but we are intended to master our mind. We're not supposed to be slaves to our instincts, our primal desires, our whims, and our fancies. We're supposed to be in charge of our mind. We have the ability to replace habits which we don't like. You know, habits control us. Our habit thoughts are not the same as our philosophies. Our thinking is what we have digested in the mind and we spew out in our behaviors. Our philosophy is higher up, but we don't behave according to our philosophies. And that's why we have to become people with integrity, where our philosophies and our thinking are lined up. So that's rule number 3. Line up your thinking, which is what all of your communication springs from, with your actual philosophy. Because your philosophy is probably right on. You're not into badgering people. You're not into gossiping. You're not into hurting people's feelings. But these are things we all do because we don't line up our minds with our philosophies, nor our heart. Rule number 4, pay attention. Be a good listener. Listen beyond the spoken word. Listen beyond the looks that are communicated. Look to what your spouse is feeling, and do so without judgment, so that you're not condemning them, criticizing them, putting them down in any way, but you're listening to them and respecting them as human beings who have flaws, but you're there for them. You know, when we get into the relationship of marriage, we give up our number 1 position in our lives. And what we're supposed to do if we want to be happy, you can't be happy if you're putting yourself first. Fact. Put your spouse first. So use this rule. Listen to what their needs are without judgment, criticism, condemnation, etc. In other words, love them for who they are. I hope you have found this useful. I'm sure you have if you've been paying attention. Have you been listening to me? I'm Paul Friedman. I founded the Marriage Foundation. We are here for you. Peruse our website, see what we have to offer you. As a human being, you deserve an incredible life. Let us help you get there. God bless and take care. Thank you.